from Washington, D.C. that you don't normally get to see. There's new developments, highways.
That was the first building of the law school here on this particular.
You know what the difference is? I trust that. Trust their judgment. So the sirens don't bother me here.
Many researchers who want to study the effects of changes in the feeds on social welfare topics. That's changed recently with the advent of Blue Sky in the past couple of years, where there's an open source ecosystem where anyone can contribute a feed to the ecosystem. So with Green Earth, what we've been doing is we've been developing the infrastructure to host state-of-the-art social media recommender systems on Blue Sky that enable, again, an open ecosystem where researchers can come and launch experiments for how actual changes to the feed algorithms impact social interest issues and welfare of people using them. So today we're in the stage where we've just got our state-of-the-art recommender pipeline built and deployed on Blue Sky. We're soliciting users to come and use the feeds themselves so that we can grow the user base to a point where we can run statistically significant experiments on the platform. There's some early research that we've seen people augmenting feeds on platforms outside of Blue Sky, like Facebook, Twitter, etc. But that only tells part of the picture, because when you have something like a browser extension that's augmenting a feed, you're really not changing the start of the pipeline when the feed is created. So the hope is by building these feeds in an open ecosystem, we can draw research communities to the feeds and to develop their own feeds and run experiments. And that's exactly what our team's going to be doing with the inaugural set of experiments this fall.
A high degree of accuracy in the context of studying slavery's legacies. We searched for links between an 1860s data set of enslaved individuals in Montgomery County, Maryland, and a data set of 2 million Black Americans in the 1900 federal US Census using 3 different methods: the Vlagi-Center probabilistic record linkage model, zero-shot prompting of the Quen large language model, and zero-shot prompting of a fine-tuned version of the Quen language model. After comparing the performances of these models by manually validating the subset of matches that were found by all 3 methods, we determined that both probabilistic record linkage and generative AI record linkage can be used as substitutes for manual record linkage. However, when fine-tuning an AI model for record linkage, it is important to use manually validated data as opposed to synthetic data in order to ensure accuracy. If you'd like to find out more, please come visit my poster. Thank you.
Making public debt commitments transparent by building an accessible and searchable platform of public debt documents. And currently, the law team manually collects all all of the documents from websites of governments and international organizations, filters out the non-sovereign debt documents, and manually tags and labels all of the legal clauses within the documents. And our goal is to reduce the manual workload of the law team through a mix of existing technologies and AI enhancements. We use Playwright, which is a Python package to scrape documents from these websites, a support vector machine to filter out all the non-sovereign debt documents and only retain the relevant documents, and then use LLMs and neural networks to extract the metadata and legal clauses from the documents. And to learn more about the results, please stop by my poster.
And this is especially interesting to researchers as it, this type of data in the education space can demonstrate the process of learning. However, this type of voice data is inherently biometric in a way that it can identify your gender, your origin, your sexual orientation, and even like medical conditions. So with that in mind, I evaluated privacy-enhancing technologies for audio across 3 dimensions: privacy, utility, and computational efficiency. And I found that there's a classic triangle trade-off between these 3 different dimensions. So basically, you can keep 2 at the expense of 1. So for example, for a simple audio filter, it is very efficient and can preserve utility, but it could be easily undone by any AI system or attacker model. So if anyone has any more questions, I'd love to talk about it in my poster. Thank you so much.
Project with Dr. Tanzania very much. And local election officials communicate with the voters every day on social media, and to study their communication strategies at scale, we need to label each post by topics, from voter education and election security to misinfo responses. However, hand coding it is extremely time consuming, so we built an LLM-assisted automatic pipeline that ingests each with raw exports, prepares the post, labels them using our code book, and produces a fully logged data set with a prioritized review queue. And in a blind test against human coding, the level of agreement was 94%. So our project optimizes a labor-intensive labeling task where semantic analysis is required without bypassing human review. If you're interested, go the poster to learn more. Yeah, thank you.
Classifies every provision of statute by function. And right now, throughout the summer, we were focused on evaluating whether the ontology actually improves retrieval or not. To do this, we developed an evaluation benchmark co-designed with real education authority users. And what we hoped to do is to be able to understand through real questions that reflect real realities whether the AI tool is able to actually retrieve the right statute and to be able to provide the right accuracy. I'm happy to walk through the evaluation design and any other questions that you might have right there at my poster. Thank you so much.
Texts are distinctly different from texts written by trained human scientists. And this matters because people's understanding of the nature of science as a process which is shaped by these texts matters for a functioning democracy. In understanding evolving guidance during the pandemic, and understanding how and where consensus on climate change and vaccines form. So he asked, when people read AI-generated science writing, do they perceive the science as flatter, as in more settled, less debated, and more authoritative than human-trained scientists written texts? To test this, we built a survey experiment to measure people's perception of the epistemic nature of these human-written versus AI-generated texts. And while we wait for IRB approval, we fielded the experiment on 200 AI participants using a platform called AI. And 2 results stood out. First, the flattening was focused on 2 areas of uncertainty and discussion, where it decreased 2 points within the 5-point scale. And secondly, the people's baseline understanding of the nature of science also mattered in this effect, telling us that who is reading the text matters as well as what is being written. I'm happy to talk more at my poster later.
Research about research using AI. We tested Gemini, Claude, and Qwen models for their capabilities in case study research. So we had them generate case studies, and then we compared them qualitatively with a benchmark case study written by a researcher. And they covered the key content well, and they used simple footnotes well. but they struggled with more complex citation rules like IEEE footnotes, and they tended to have awkward sentence transitions and other general style issues. And Claude especially tended to be verbose. As for quantifying these results, we're currently running single blind researcher ratings comparing the generated and benchmark case studies. And as for fixing those style issues, we're currently creating a style guide combining the best aspects of the generated and benchmark case studies. In the future, this research is planned to be part of a multi-agent system designed to help case study researchers at multiple steps in the case study process.
Thank you.
Really affecting jobs, or is it just Main Street buzz? So for the last 5 weeks, we've been exploring, as a team, we've been exploring various different ways to approach this, but we wanted to find a real measurable change and answer to this overall question.
Yeah, so we set out to answer 3 questions. First, are software jobs and data jobs changing differently compared to the rest of the market right now? And we found that they were more sensitive to economic macro indicators and technology indicators.
Yeah, and then second, we wanted to see if deep learning models can do a better job at forecasting future job openings as opposed to traditional time series models. So what we found was that the traditional time series model consistently won up against the deep learning models that we did create and build. This is largely, we felt, due to the fact that the AI boom is still, again, it's all still relatively new when it comes to especially like sequential data and forecasting. So the simpler, in a case of parsimony, a classic case of parsimony, the more simpler model kind of won out in our case.
Yeah, and finally, is the proliferation of AI actually, can we see real measurable change in job postings today? And in fact, we found that over the most AI exposed occupations, we have seen a decline in posting activity compared to the pre-AI baseline.
Yeah, and kind of to go about this whole project, we combined job openings with technological and economic indicators. And then we built and compared both deep learning and traditional time series models. And then lastly, we looked at millions of job postings and job descriptions, analyzing them using natural language processing and AI exposure metrics. So come see our
To learn more.
To learn, yes.
Understand how students learn and engage, and how this helps teachers provide more intentional and effective instruction. We use data from the International Computer Information Literacy Study from 2023 to see beyond test scores and see how students solve computational thinking problems. And so we developed 2 research questions from that process. The first question was, what factors best predict students' computational thinking success? And then the second question was, what patterns of engagement emerge as students work through computational thinking tests?
So overall, we had 2,353 students in our data set. We narrowed it down to look at students only in the US who were playing 2 different games. One was the farm drone game and one was the automated bus game. There are around 900 students in each who were playing either game, and each game kind of required students to use different algorithms to get the best score possible. We analyzed that to determine computational thinking.
And to tackle the first question, we've tried to figure out which background variable influenced the computational thinking score the most, and to our surprise, information, communication technology, experience, and confidence in the student had the most effect, as opposed to socioeconomic status, which is surprising because our data was 13-year-olds, so they don't have much time in their lives to have experience, so that was very surprising.
For the second question, we used the data from the student test performance and the time they spent on each of the tests, looking for if any student profiles, clear student profiles emerge. And they did emerge, and we classified them as beginner, and then intermediary, and proficient. And of course, we have more information on our poster over there, but we would like to acknowledge the great teamwork and also the assistance we got from our RAs, Michelle Kim and Bin Hoi Chen, and the guidance from Dr. Adam Green and especially Dr. Shivoy Bredha. Thank you.
My name is CJ, and our group focused on the classification of glioblastoma cell states using deep learning. So glioblastoma is the most aggressive form of brain cancer, and one of the reasons that it's so deadly is that it's very heterogeneous, meaning that cells within the same tumor can occupy many different cellular environments. And in order to study this, we use single-cell RNA sequencing data, which basically just tells us how active genes are within individual cells. The data set that we looked at in particular is called the GBMAP data set, and how that was comprised is it had over 1 million rows, each representing one cell from the 240 or so glioblastoma patients, and then each column was the genes, the 25,000 genes, and their expression values.
Hi, I'm Colin, and yeah, so taking that data, we wanted to actually classify out the cells. So we trained neural networks to first classify the cells into malignant and non-malignant, and then within the malignancies, we wanted to classify them into these 4 proposed subtypes. Performance-wise, we were very strong in differentiating between malignant and healthy cells with about 97% accuracy. Inside the subtypes, we ranged from about 60 to 70% depending on the type. But one of the most striking results we were able to take away is these proposed subtypes from literature very much exist on a biological continuum. So we were able to look at cells that were very much kind of classified in between types by the model and identify genetic pathways that seem to correspond with this transition. And if you want to learn more specifics, check out our poster.